Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, everybody. That's a lot about me. And I like to say, as I told the facilitators last Thursday night, since I'm from the East Coast, I'm a 14th-generation Vermonter, I can brag. Midwesterners aren't supposed to brag. But if you come from the East Coast and you don't brag, nobody notices you. So anyway, that's one of my excuses. It's just absolutely lovely to see you tonight, and I want to say, while Pastor Chris is somewhere within hearing range, how happy we are and grateful we are that we're able to be here tonight. It's a huge commitment on the church's part, and it's just lovely. And they've gone out of their way, moved some meetings that would be tonight so that we can have all the spaces. So I have a number of things that I want to say. Everyone's done a beautiful job introducing you to the program. Some of you know about it already because you were with us at St. Andrews in the spring for our Virgin trip. It was really something, and we had 164 people there, and we delivered 564 hours of free grief support. So we have a record started that we have to live up to now. I do want to say also, don't be worried, come right in, it's just fine, you're welcome. I do want you to know that we're going to be filming my talk tonight. All of you are looking forward, so you won't be on the video. And this is Ashton Cadillo, and he and his dad are doing the AV work here at Trinity. And in the last minute, they responded and Ash showed up, so I'm very happy to have him here. Our goal is to get our talks onto our website. We thought that we'd accomplish that at St. Andrews, but it didn't work out, except for one. So when you go on our website, if you have a brochure, the website is mentioned there. You'll find the talk tonight and you'll find the subsequent talks, if we can continue to work it out to upload those to the website. So for those of you who know others who wanted to be here, or people who join later, just let them know they can pick up whatever sessions we hope. We can't guarantee, but we hope that will happen. A couple of things I want to say about the program. It's unique in some ways. This is just kind of the Growing Through Loss program going back in time. I won't go way back. Last Thursday night I tried to convince them that this program began in 1935, and for some reason they didn't believe me. I said, I think Pastor Len and I were just twinkles in our parents' eyes about that time. We didn't have a grief program. But I do want to say we're making a very powerful effort, and we could use your help, everyone that's here. We want to be very careful that we present ourselves in this program as a community program. We want to be careful that we don't shut out anyone who's not of the Christian faith, and yet it's a bit of a bind because we need to have our meetings in churches because that's who has the room and that's who welcomes us. And our churches, many of them see this as their outreach program. So I just want to say that. So if you, it's not that people can't talk about their faith and their beliefs and how they made it through some difficult times in their groups, but we're going to try to present from here a view that would be open for anybody that doesn't depend on someone's Christian doctrines. Do you follow me? It's an awkward thing. It is for me as well. It's very difficult not to testify for what your faith has done for you over the years, but it does shut out others who maybe are angry at God right now, or who have very different persuasion, or just plain aren't church people. Just plain are not. So we're working hard to do that. The other thing I wanted to say was we're unique in that we have this psychoeducational program, which is what we classify ourselves as, where this 45-minute lecture that will start each one will be about loss and grief in general. When I look out here, if you all had a little sign and you could say, here are my losses, you would probably, many of you would have a loss list this long. And we're asking you to pick whichever one of the losses that seem the most prevalent or the most troublesome to you right now, and to go to that group. And then keep joining us, and you can be at a different group next series. And we'll be in Shepherd of the Valley in Afton in the spring of 2025. That's already set. So that's unique in our program, that we're addressing the major losses. And if there's losses that you all think need to be addressed, please let us know. And we'll see what we can do about building that into our program. Now, I have an old joke. Well, I don't know if it's a joke. You have to decide. But I want to make the point that we are, as a society, still, unfortunately, even with all the hospice work and the wonderful teaching that's gone on and the celebrities who've given us support for hospice and palliative care and such, we're still a death-denying society. We favor youth. We want to look younger than we really are. It's just our society in particular is very youth-oriented. And we don't particularly like to talk about death. I mean, here we are tonight on a Tuesday night talking about loss and grief. Here we are and doing it. But it has not always been that way, and we're moving more and more to the openness of talking about it. But it seems that these three gentlemen were standing beside the casket of their good friend, Charlie. It was a ways back when everybody had a casket and it wasn't all about ashes, right? And here's Charlie, and Charlie's lying in the casket, supposedly dead. And his three friends are standing there, and the first friend looks at his buddies and he says, you know, when I die, I hope somebody will say the nice things about me that they said about Charlie. And the second guy said, well, you know, I'd like that too. He said, but I'd really like to hear a little bit about what a good father I am and what a good community member I am. And the third guy looks at both of these two and he says, he said, what's the matter with you? He said, there's only one thing that I want to hear when I'm in the casket and they're looking down at me. He's breathing. It's almost funny. Let me tell you, it's a job getting humor into this kind of a situation. So that's my stab at humor. I hope I didn't kill it. So the next thing I'd like to do is give you a little bit of background on just on grief and loss. That's how we've titled it this time. I will be talking about family grief because that's what my doctoral work was in. And I think you might find some parts of it interesting. And I like it because when we look at our families broadly in times of loss, we can do a lot of things that prevent trouble in the future just by being aware of how various family members tend to respond to a death of one of the people in the family. So here's a couple of things. My colleagues tease me because every chance I get behind the podium anywhere, I start saying, we have to remember, grief is not a disease. Grief is not a disease. I go back to my nursing history and surgical intensive care, and what I want you to think about is, with me, is whatever loss we have, from the loss of a penknife or an earring, something small, to something as important and painful as the loss of a loved one. The loss itself is the way in which we are hurt or wounded. The loss is the wound. And then the grieving process, which we are all engaged in here tonight, more or less, that's the way in which we heal from our losses. And we tend to get that the other way around, and we say things to each other like, how are you doing? Is your grief better? Are you feeling better? Are you getting over it? Or are you still going to that grief group? Or so on. We treat grief as if it were a disease. And so I want to just keep coming back to that. We embrace grief, we lean into grief, we let ourselves grieve, and when we do that, we begin to get our feet under us and be able to cope with life as it strikes us, regardless of what we've had for loss. So I want to drive that home. And then the second piece that I do wear my friends out with, and some of my colleagues, is the whole notion, and I want to say this 40 times, and we don't have time. There is no such thing, there are no such things as stages of grief. We have Kubler-Ross's work, and it's been used and misused and misinterpreted, but it turns out that there is no research whatsoever around the world that supports grief as coming to us in stages. And the harm that it's done is that people get a kind of even if we don't intend it and we use it casually, is they get the idea that there are these stages, that you have denial and then you have acceptance at the top, and you have bargaining and you have anger. There's no research to support that. Yes, we have those emotions. Yes, we have those reactions. But there's no stage theory that's been confirmed by any research so far. And if it does, we'll tell you about it, if I hear about it. But the thing that I find that's very helpful to look at is what are the losses that we have? We've certainly listed them in the brochure, the losses that we've identified. Some of them we'll have brief groups for going forward. Some of them may not turn out to draw a lot of people, in which case we'll shift our focus to other types of loss. But a man named David Peretz did a good job some years ago just kind of telling us what is the meaning of loss. You know, Socrates said the beginning of knowledge is the definition of terms. And if we can think of loss broadly, loss is being without something that we once had or that we thought that we had. So for instance, if a couple wants very much to have a child and they find out that they can't, there is no child, there will not be a child, but they grieve something that never actually existed. In some ways, they grieve the dream of having a child. So losses are very, very broad, and they can be of material things, they can be losses. Losses are faculties that we lose one at a time as we age. Lots of hearing aids and glasses in this room, some extra new hips and various body parts that we've got to. So we have losses that have to do with that person. And if you could think about who we are as individuals, sort of like a pizza pie with wedges, you could probably, if you drew a picture, identify what your wedges would be in your picture of yourself. Might be, some of them might be the talents you have, the good brain that you have, your ability to sing, your faith system, your talents that you have in terms of your work world and so on. Any one of those slices of that self pizza we can lose. And so some of you will be talking tonight in your groups and going into the future about what have you lost of yourself in relation to whatever loss you've identified and what group you've chosen. My husband and I got married at 18 and 19. Most of what I know about myself as a woman in the world happened after I got married. I mean, when you get married that young, what do you know? I mean, he could play piano, classical music, and he could sing, and he could dance. He was a good kisser. So what else do you need at that age, right? You're with me, right? And all of that can be lost. And when you lose a partner, you lose all of that. You lose the memories. You lose the things that they brought to your life. So let's think of loss as broadly as we can. You may be in a group about one loss, but it's fine to bring in the others that you've experienced that are related to it. So I want to say what you find in your seat, and if any of you don't have one, let us know. There's a model that I want to just lightly touch on as a model that you can certainly look at it with your facilitators later. It's called the dual process model, and it's a wonderful model that does have research base. It's been around and very popular in the academic world since 1999. And it comes out of the University of Utrecht in the Netherlands, which is where a lot of our grief research has been done, much of it on widows and widowers because they're the most accessible. But if you look at that, it's kind of an egg-shaped model. And the main points about it are, on the left you see loss-oriented, which means that's the side of our grieving that has to do with focusing on what's been lost. The part that has to do with the actual grief work, the remembering, the crying, the quietness, the sadness, all that the actual grieving, active grieving is. There's something on that side that I want to point out on your left side if you're holding it in front of you. The intrusion of grief. The idea behind that is that you're going along and you're doing whatever you're doing, and then all of a sudden, when your guard is most down, comes something that will remind you of what your loss is, the person that you lost, something in your memory, something in your childhood, and then there is the pain, there's the feeling of sadness and loss right there. I remember walking around, I think I was getting incense or something at the dollar store. And my husband and I were dancers. We did ballroom dancing forever. I think the last time we danced together, he fell in the middle of the floor, which was not pretty. But I was in the dollar store, and all of a sudden, while I'm thinking about 40 other things, comes on the loudspeaker the song, "May I Have This Dance for the Rest of My Life." I was done. I was done. I could feel it start in my toes. I had no choice about just plain, I can't really say losing it right there, because actually I was finding it, right? I wasn't losing it, but it was really powerful to me. My guard was down, nobody was with me, and boom, there it was. There it was. And a lot of our grieving, whether it's a small loss, a large loss, multiple losses, we feel the pain when we get reminded. So there is a wonderful theory called reminder theory that just says that's when we do most of our grief work, when we're reminded. So when you're in your group later tonight and in the weeks coming up, and someone tells about their loss, you feel it. That's not bad. It hurts before it feels better. So don't hesitate to let yourself kind of lean into that. We'll be reminded when we share, we remind each other of our losses. We also remind each other that we can make it. And so that's a very important piece of this grief work. Then you can read for yourself, continuing bonds. Instead of breaking the bond with the person who's died, now we work in the academic field and also in therapeutic fields. We work on helping people continue some way that they can stay connected to the person who died. So what do? We do memorials, we start programs, we give money to Growing Through Loss in somebody's honor. Listen to that. Do you see how I slipped that in there? Anyway, we remember people in various ways. And it helps us to stay connected. Now on the other side, on the right side, if you have that model in front of you, is a restoration-oriented form of coping. What it really boils down to this is that you go back into the pain, you go back this way into the parts that hurt, that are difficult to think about, that keep us feeling like life isn't what we need it to be. And then something happens, we kind of get it together, we cry or we talk to somebody, and then we move forward again. We start living in today. And I think what's going to be wonderful is next week, Dr. Mary Freitag is going to talk about building life alongside grief. We bring ourselves together and then we move forward. Then something reminds us and we go back. And the whole idea of this model is we oscillate back and forth. You know, some of those fans that turn like that, you know, we turn to the right and we move forward. We turn to the left and we go back. Things will set us back. Songs will set us back. Memories that we have, lots of things will set us back. And so I just want to really get the idea. You see that zigzag line in the middle. We're doing pretty well, then we're not. We're moving forward, I think I can do this, I've got this, I think I can do it. Then something happens, you wake up tomorrow morning, no, I'm not so sure I can. In fact, I don't even want to. I mean, some of you have had that feeling. Well, why am I getting up? For what? For what? What am I getting up for? So this idea that we really move back and forth and in and out of grief is really an important one to remember. And just, that's how it goes. You'll feel better after a while, and then you'll feel worse, then you'll feel better. And that's the way it goes. That's the path of effective and healthy grieving. I'm surprised sometimes when clients come in to see me and they've done a fair number of months, even sometimes years. I thought I was doing really well until yesterday, and now I'm right back to square one. And I want to say, no, you're not. It feels like that, doesn't it? It really feels like you're back in square one. But you've made this much progress already. And the normal pattern, you know, we don't have any real meaning of normal. Normal is just a setting on the dryer, right? That's it. Otherwise, no normal, no normal. Don't let anybody tell you that's not normal grief or not a normal reaction. So we just have that movement back and forth that continues to happen, and that's normal. That is the pattern that is healthy and that we really experience. So the key is that accepting the oscillation back and forth in minutes, sometimes hours, sometimes days. People have periods of time. If they're fortunate, they don't have a depression on top of the grief, which is oftentimes the people that come to see me, they have that double whammy where they've got a major loss and then they also develop or come into it with a depression, and that's tough because depression and grief are not the same thing. They can feel a lot alike, but they're not the same thing, and when they come together, they require some very tricky treatment. So that's what we hope for, is that our grief is clean and we can do a healthy job of grieving it without having to cope with depression as well. So that's the dual process model. Help yourself to it, share it if you wish. It's not something you might want to talk a little bit about in group, and maybe not. It may just be irrelevant. But you have it, and it's research-based, and you can rely on it as being accurate. And certainly we can talk more about it. The other things about what I want to share tonight have to do with the family, the grieving family. And we have time enough to do just that. Does anybody have a comment or a thought about anything that we've said so far? Anything that our facilitators have said or Pastor Chris said? Anything that anybody has on their mind? Pastor Lucas is back there with the microphone if anybody has something they want to say. Anybody? Ready for you? If not, then I will march on and we'll talk about the family. Okay? I'll do this. I've studied family for 9 years, so you can imagine getting it into 9 minutes. We'll see how much we can do. But this is a metaphor. Metaphors represent some very complicated aspects of things. And one way to think about a family is that it's like a mobile, and there's balance. If we could take it, we would have the fan over here blowing at this, and you would see that a family is a kind of a fluid thing. It changes, and certain things will balance a family. It's even so that balance is not always a good thing. I've got a bottle here, alcohol bottle. I think it's really root beer. I'm not sure. Maybe not. I'm not sure. But let's just say that this gentleman here is drinking, he has problem drinking. And if you were to put this little bottle on over here, you can see what happens. He's down, he goes down, and look at her. She needs support. This is what Al-Anon's about, right? So she gets the help she needs, and that puts things back in balance. You get the idea. You can put illness, you can put anything onto this so that you get the idea that families need to find their balance. One thing that does happen in troubled families is that the family members will make up for the family member that is either ill or has a chemical problem or whatever, and that's a balanced family, but it's not balanced in a way that's healthy for people as they move forward. So balance isn't always the best goal. So I want to tell you a few things. First of all, think of the family as a mobile, and that a family as a unit is more than grandpa plus grandma plus mom plus dad plus each of the kids. In itself, it has a history. It has customs and habits that make up what the family is. It has various parts. It has various roles. One of the important things about a family is who has what role, who does which things. And it has boundaries. So around this family, we have an imaginary boundary. It says who's in the family and who's out. And if your families are like many of the families that I know, and only 25% of our American families look like this now, because we have so many different forms of family. We always have had, but now it's more blatant, it's more noticeable. So there are people who are really not blood relatives, but they're people, sort of family members by choice. I have a pastor, Valerie Brown, who's the pastor up at Peace Lutheran in Coon Rapids. She's my bonus daughter and friend. And her daughter is our granddaughter, very much as if she were formally adopted, but she isn't. So many of us have family members that are maybe even closer than folks who are related by blood. So we have families by blood, we have families by choice, we have blended families, which is kind of a misnomer because they don't blend all that well. You can't put them in blenders. It doesn't work. It's not that easy. It's more like dual nuclei families and such, different descriptors. So we have boundaries that are a boundary around the family. We have boundaries, which is the one I want you to pay most attention to, is we have generational boundaries. So when you look at a family, this one, ours, mine, you want these people to be identified as the grandparents. They function in this role as the grandparents. Think about how many families you know where grandparents are raising kids, right? Think of how many families you know, and maybe some in our own families, where the kids are having to function as if they were adults. I know in Africa, I have a friend who was in Zimbabwe, She said, we were teaching 10-year-old boys how to be the heads of families because there was so much death from AIDS. So a healthy family, it's clear who is where on the family tree, so to speak. So here are the grandparents, mom and dad, the children, we've got a couple, we've got a dog here. This question mark is here because we don't know all about any family's history. There's lots back there that we don't know, and it all feeds into where we are today. Things tumble down the generations that are not dealt with, and proclivities, the possibility of illnesses being passed on and so on. So we have this boundary around the family, we have generational boundaries. And one reason I want to emphasize that is because if we can keep people in their healthiest generation, I don't want to say normal, that's the dryer. We can keep people in the generation where they belong, the family's going to do better. They're more likely to thrive. So one of the things that I want to do here is I'm going to take Grandpa off. If we look at the statistics and the actuarial charts, it's usually the men die younger, right? And we're going to assume that that's what happens here. So Grandpa's going to go over here. And I'm going to show you just a couple of things that can happen when we lose this particular family member in this family. Here's Grandma now. Here's where she is. This is her son. Look where she went. Now, he's a good guy. He was raised well. He's responsible. And he's very, very worried about his mom. Very worried about her. It's very common in families that when one parent dies, people get really worried, the people in the next generations, about the parent that's left. Does dad know how to cook? Does he know how to get a shirt washed? Does mom know how to do, days ago it would be, does she know how to do a checkbook? Does she know how to get the oil changed in the car? You know, you catch my drift, and I'm talking about very typical family problems. So here we have mom, and she is coming closer. She did, now she changed her mind. I think they have Lily's bottle. Anyway, what happens here, two things could happen. One is she's going to become closer to her daughter-in-law, which is fine, that's fine. But the son is very conscientious, and he's watching mom, and she's worried. So he brings himself in lots of ways up here and makes an attempt at saving his dad. I mean, taking his dad's place and saving mom, making sure she's all right. Well, he's worried and he's anxious, so he's probably there more than she needs him. Could be, right? I do hear that. I have worked with a lot of widows that said, I just wish everybody'd leave me alone. I'll get rid of dad's tools when I get good and ready, and I don't want to hear anything more about it, whatever. But here's the idea. Now things are up. She's feeling better because she's got some help here. But look what happens in the next generation. We mess up that next generation. We call it an emotional debt, is what we call it. It's kind of a clever term, I think. But anyway, here she is. And she's at risk now because she needed a partner. There's 3 kids and a dog, 4 kids and a dog. And she needs her husband there in full role, even though his dad just died, right? So she's trying to be a good sport. She was raised well. She's got a kind heart. So what happens then is two things can happen. One of these kids, maybe we'll go with the daughter this time, she sees mom's distress. Mom starts talking to her as if mom were her friend. It's never good when mom and dad start acting as if they're friends and not parents. Because it can be, I mean, we joke about it, that's okay. But when the kid feels as if they're equal to a parent, then where's the parent? And how do you get to be a kid? And what happens then is the kids get what we call parentified. In other words, the children get treated as if they were adults when they're not. And there goes the childhood. That's the idea. And I'm making it kind of extreme so you can track with me. So here's the daughter. Now, clearly she's not heavy enough to be dad. But she's up there helping mom. Mom's leaving the little kids with her, babysit. And the little kids are saying, "You're not the boss of me." You ever heard that one? "You're not the boss of me." But mom's in a tough spot. She's trying to be a good sport, worried about mother-in-law. And here she is this way. The other thing that can happen, and often does, is that mom, it will keep the daughter down here, but mom will get connected with one of these kids too much. In psychotherapy jargon, it's called getting enmeshed. I prefer to say over-loving. It's less judgmental. And so here's mom. You see that she's teaming up with this daughter. Oftentimes it'll be a little one. It'll be the baby or it'll be one up because mom is emotionally deprived here. She hasn't got her partner in the way she needs it. And so she's needy, emotionally needy, more or less. And so she gets too close to one of these kids. Maybe this one, I don't know. I'm kind of manipulating this for them to make a point, no fair. Therapists are like that. We think we know better than folks do themselves sometimes. So let's just say she gets over-bonded with this child. And what happens then, that child senses it, even at 2 years old. They sense an emotionally needy parent and will attempt to comfort them. I worked with a family in the north suburbs years and years ago, and mom was the camp director of the home. And when she died, nobody knew what to do. Everybody was lost in the family. And the dad and the little boy, who was probably under 3, closer to 2, as soon as dad started telling me what happened and that his wife died and started to cry, the little one would wrap his arms around dad and pet him like this. There now. When what should have been happening was that dad had the little one comforting. You follow me, right? And where we are right now, and those of you who've lost a loved one in particular, we look at our families and see if we can keep those generational boundaries where they need to be so the little kids don't have to be adults. And here's what happens, and I'm going to put in a plug now for Growing Through Loss, because if mom finds support from other people, other widows, other people like herself, wouldn't you know I don't have the attitude. Let's just say, here she is. She's here at group tonight, this mom. And she's going to go to a group and she's going to meet another widow. And they're going to kind of hit it off, maybe if we're lucky, right? And these 2 women know what it's about because they've lost their spouses, right? They've got something in common. Now, especially if their families look like this. And what it does when we reach out to somebody at our own age is that we don't use the family. We don't draw them up too much. I don't mean we shouldn't use them at all, but we don't bring them up into the levels where we are. Does that make sense? That's not quite 9 years worth, but it's a lot. And the point for us, you facilitators for sure, who'll be watching for this, and those of you thinking about your own families, how are we bringing our children up to have to function as adults? Sometimes moms will start talking to their daughters about intimate things that are just not mother-daughter kinds of conversations. And particularly in times of acute loss, it's a very difficult thing to unwind so that people can kind of grow and thrive in the right generational style. I had a woman come up to me when I go to the North Suburban Grief Coalition, the one that has been going for 40 years. I go there twice a year to speak and to do this particular talk. And one woman came up to me and she said, 6 years ago, Janice, you showed me that mobile. She said, and I realized that day I'm a parentified child, and that explained most of my life to me. All I know how to do is take care of other people. I haven't a clue how to take care of myself. So the idea we have is this great advantage with a little bit of knowledge about this. We can watch our families and try to let kids be kids and keep the grandparents so that they have the social network, so that they're not stranded as not having anybody who really understands. Where I find the most support, frankly, is I find support from other widows whose husbands died from dementia. My husband had dementia for 10 years. I took care of him. It was a rough go. In fact, he was the pastor at this church, and we had his going away party right here. So it's speaking of intrusive thoughts and grieving because we're reminded, here it is for me right this minute. And I can feel it just telling you this, right? So that's how grief works. And that was 2001. He died in 2010. I lost my daughter, my oldest daughter, the same year. She died in January, Lynn died in December. So that's who I get. I get it for other widows. I know what it's like somewhat to be working with somebody who's got a spouse dying from dementia, slow, painfully, present but gone. Very difficult kind of illness and very difficult kind of death. So we look for that. We look for people who have some of these things in common. And what you have here is a place and a time to do some of your grieving. or to be there in support of somebody else, or you may just kind of be sort of neutral through your group time and even tonight with our gathering here. Neutral, kind of, I don't know if I need this or what. But you might hear something, an idea, or you might be able to say a word to somebody about, well, I remember when that was going on for me, and then thus and such happened. One of the things that you may or may not hear Paul Johnson say when he comes is, it's helpful to us to look at where we are and to say, what have I lost? What have I lost? What do I still have? And what can I do with what I still have? And that approach seems to be extremely helpful. And this setting, this model will help you to kind of figure out some of that. It's amazing what it is that you've actually lost. I missed having a dance partner. I've dated, I've been in love a couple times, and nobody dances, not like Len. Not like Len. And so these things are very critical to us to be able to say, this is what I've lost, and this loss that I've had. I lost my career, I lost my house, I lost my dog. I have a therapy dog, oh my goodness, he was the third one to go. First Cindy, then Len, then the dog. Oh my word, I was on the floor weeping about the dog because he was carrying all my pain for 3 years after the deaths in the family. So the pet loss group is really important too. We keep that in mind. So we have a couple minutes, not much, but a little bit of time. I want to see if anyone has a comment, a question. You could go so far as to say that is not very helpful. Janice, you made us use our brain too much tonight. Yeah, we've got somebody back there who's been nodding. I noticed that she had a couple of smiles and nods. I look for the faces of support here as I talk to you. Please.
Hi, Tanya, alcoholic. I feel like I'm kind of at an AA meeting here for grief. I find it fascinating what you're saying, and I'm having a lot of aha moments personally as you're explaining this family. I was the parent. I came into that role, and now it's time to take care of myself. I want to break the cycle. So thank you.
Good for you, and good luck taking care of yourself. And it makes sense, when we overuse something, exercise, drugs, alcohol, whatever we overuse. I overuse work, frankly, it works pretty well, has a lot of rewards to it. But you don't stop and have your pain then. But we reach for something that will help us to feel better, and we reached for too much usually. So thank you so much for being vulnerable and saying that. You got support here, for sure. Anybody else? Thought, question, comment? I know we're thinking about refreshments, and we're thinking about getting into our group and all the rest of it. I think we've got somebody back there. Maybe? Yes, we do.
Yes, I was a foster mom for 40 years, a long time. And I found that the children that come to our home are parents, they're parents.
Yes.
And one girl came and she had a sister that she took care of who was
Yes.
married.
Yeah.
Worked with her, she came when she was 9, and the other child was 4 years old.
Right.
And I had to, she would, when the dryer would go off, she'd tell me.
Sure. Sure. Let me see if I can repeat your point so that people can hear.
Yeah, they just, they take over.
Right, yeah, yeah. What's your first name?
My question,
Your first name?
my name is Marlene.
Marlene. Marlene is telling us about the fact she was a foster parent, and she saw exactly what it is we've been talking about, that when these little kids would come from broken homes, from homes where things were not as they should be, needed to be, she saw them, even one older sister taking care of a younger sister. And as a great example, the dryer goes off, it rings the bell, and here goes this little kid off to get the wash out of the dryer. So conditioned to be a parent. And it makes me think that that may be her future, that she will try to take, I had a lovely nurse nurse client years and years ago. She worked nights at the university, and she came from a big alcoholic family in New York. And here's the metaphor, the men can handle this, I think, don't you think? Sure. So she'd say to me, no, Janice, when I wake up in the morning and I feel like one great big bust trying to nurse the universe, I know I'm in trouble. You handled that all right, didn't you, Pastor Lucas?
Yes,
Yeah,
I did.
good, all right, I thought you could. Pastor Lucas has a new baby, so he's been in the business of all of this that we're talking about.
I just can't believe I'm still standing upright.
There we are. Well, all right, I want to read you two pieces before we break up. One comes from Leonard Cohen. I wish I could, I do have a hoarse voice, but I can't sing quite the way he does. But I find this very helpful, and I have a joke on myself. I thought it was a poem. Turns out it's a wonderful song. You can get it on YouTube, and I don't know what the title is for sure, but Leonard Cohen sings it, and he wrote about it in a book called Stranger Music. And here's how it goes, and I think it's not a bad way to think about all this. Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. I like that. Now, I haven't done this for you, but there are many models of grief support and theory. One of them is that, and it's lovely to see it happen, we've drawn from Asian culture a great deal about meditation and about mindfulness. And many of the very sophisticated psychotherapy models include the whole idea of mindfulness and meditation. And so I want to read this last piece that is about inner peace, and then see if you can relate, and then we'll stop, and we'll very gradually send you off to your groups, one group at a time, right? Inner Peace is the title. If you can start the day without caffeine, if you can always be cheerful, ignoring your aches and pains, if you can resist complaining and boring people with your troubles, if you can eat the same food every day and be grateful for it, if you can understand when your loved ones are too busy to give you any time, if you can take criticism and blame without resentment, if you can conquer tension without medical help, if you can relax without alcohol, if you can sleep without the aid of drugs, you are probably the family dog. That's it.